The concept of sustainability first appeared in the Brundtland Report, published in 1987. This document, which was also referred to as Our Common Future, was elaborated for the United Nations in order to warn about the negative environmental consequences of economic development and globalization. It was written with the aim of offering solutions to the problems arising from industrialization and population growth. Today, sustainability tries to secure present needs without compromising future generations. How? Without giving up any of the three essential pillars: environmental protection, social development, and economic growth. Sustainability is concerned with assuming that nature and the environment are not an inexhaustible resource, and so it is necessary to protect them and use them rationally. Sustainability promotes social development, seeking cohesion between communities and cultures to achieve satisfactory levels in quality of life, health, and education. Thirdly, sustainability focuses on equal economic growth that generates wealth for all without harming the environment. Nowadays, many of the challenges that humans face, such as climate change or water scarcity, can only be tackled from a global perspective and by promoting sustainable development. Now that you know what sustainability is, remember to act in the present, thinking about the future.
So just a very, very quick video introduction of what it means, but I will take you to the next slide. So when we think about sustainability, we get the obvious angle, which is the environmental. We're all talking about things like net zero carbon, reducing carbon emissions, greenhouse gas, and that's amazing, that's great stuff. Within the environmental sphere also lies things like reduction in waste, adhering to the waste hierarchy, minimizing single-use plastics, reducing the use of natural resources, pollution prevention, noise, etc. What's not so easy to understand, or what people don't usually get, is the social and the economic aspect of sustainability. Remember, it's always the three pillars. If we don't find that balance between the three pillars, it's just your policy, your strategy, and your process will fall flat on its face. The economic aspect talks about things like profit. So when you think about the procurement process, it's the profitability not just for you as an organization, but also for your supply chain. So for example, not squeezing the bottom line price to gain cost savings of your supplier. For all you know that they might go bust, or they might not exist. So think about, yes, we've got a budget. We have ridiculous budgets in procurement when we need to procure something, but ensure that your supply chain is also making a healthy profit. Cost savings by using less resources, wasting less, for example, you can gain cost savings from that kind of method. Economic growth, research, and development. The social angle covers things like education. So whether it's your staff or your supply chain training, community engagement and investment, social cohesion, things like volunteering activities, STEM activities, equal opportunity, not just within your staff and your organization, but also within the organization of your supply chain, equal opportunity for tenders going out the door, that increasing diversity in all along the value chain. These are the three spheres or the three pillars of sustainability. Very, very quick definition of sustainable procurement as per the ISO 2400 standard. So it is procurement that has the most positive environmental, social, and economic impact on a whole life basis. For me, the emphasis here should have been on the word positive, because positive is proactive. Rather than you plan, source, award a contract, then something goes wrong when the works are being carried out or the goods are being delivered. So you're then reacting, then an investigation is carried out, and you're going to mitigate a risk for something that's already occurred. Positive or proactive is identifying your risks and opportunities in your sourcing strategy, adding in questions in your pre-qualification in your tenders beforehand, so that you're taking your procurement process, that tender and the supply chain along on that sustainability journey, so that nothing bad has to happen later on. So positive, proactively embedding sustainability into procurement right from the start, down the supply chain, into the tender, out to contract award. A quick few notes about the standard. It's a guidance standard. In that, I mean, if you assess your organization against the standard, you won't get a nice shiny certificate that can be put in a gold-plated frame. What you will get is a score between 0 to 5 that tells your organization where you are on that sustainability journey, how mature you are in that space. The standard gives you an understanding of what sustainable procurement is, what are the impacts and things you need to consider across the whole procurement process. So the policy, your sourcing strategies, organizing your procurement function, the process of plan, source, and manage, and how to practically implement sustainable procurement in all of your works packages and in the procurement process. Does it only apply to organizations who are large? No. It applies to any organization regardless of sector, size, and geographical location. And every stakeholder who's involved in the procurement process needs to be aware of it and aligned. And what do I mean by that? Procurement is all not down to procurement. You have stakeholders from health and safety, quality, environmental team, EDI, community engagement, investment, design team, engineering, construction managers, budget allocators, commercial team. Everyone who's involved in the process needs to be aware of sustainability. I've got a question already in the Q&A section. The slides will be made available after the workshop, either today or on Monday, with a thank you note. The standard does not replace any legislation, but it works in tandem. It takes into account government policies, PPNO 6, any other ethical frameworks that are out there that regulate procurement activities. This is what the 4 main clauses of the standard look like. You've got clause 4, 5, 6, and 7. 4 is the fundamentals. For me, the most important part of fundamentals is the drivers. What is driving you to be sustainable as an organization? It'll be different if you're in the food and beverage sector. It'll be different if you're in the fashion industry, if you're from construction, or if you're a local authority. Everyone's drivers are going to be very different. And I'll take you through what those could be on the slides further on. The policy and strategy needs to be endorsed by leadership, but there also needs to be VFL, that's visible, felt leadership right from the top, not just a fancy policy that's signed and hung in a frame on the wall. Leadership needs to walk the walk, talk the talk, and give that message in team meetings, team briefings, so that people like you and me on the ground understand that this is my organization's ambition. Hence, I'm embedding sustainability into my own processes. We'll talk about the enablers in a lot more detail further on in the session. You've got 6 little helpers that help you to actually practically embed sustainability into your process. And finally, we'll talk about the procurement process, which is plan, source, and manage. So this is just a little bit of a diagram snapshot of what is within the standard. Another little video for you based on the policy and how it works, how it should work.
Keeping the world livable for the generations to come. This is where procurement plays an essential role. ISO 2400 is the right way to do it. These international guidelines give organizations sustainable procurement policies, structure and insight. After the
Sorry about that.
corporate sustainability policy has been established, it will be incorporated into procurement policy and strategy. Procurement will consider stakeholder needs, risks and priorities. It will factor in measurement of impact and achievement and will consider staff training requirements. These preconditions help purchasers, contract managers and budgetary controllers embed sustainability in the procurement process. Think of the inclusion of social and environmental criteria, the choice for sustainable and innovative suppliers, the striving for circular procurement, and the agreement on codes of conduct. All these sustainability actions are continuously being monitored and improved. The results are then fed back to management and other stakeholders. The ISO 2400 guideline will support you and your organization when taking the steps required to keep procuring and doing business in a future-proof way.
We now go on to the fundamentals, but what the video said is quite an important concept. So it's that golden thread. You have a corporate policy, so CSR policy, that needs to help shape your procurement policy, and from the procurement policy, embedding your sustainability requirements into the process. And I'll explain that in the further slides to come. Fundamentals, so a couple of principles and things to consider here. Managing the risk. But before you manage the risk, identify the risks brought on by whatever it is you're procuring, whoever are the suppliers sat in your tender list. Every supplier will not bring on the same risk and opportunity. Every works package does not bring on the same risk and opportunity in the space of sustainability. Identify what are those risks. Is it carbon emissions? Is it waste? Is it issues of modern slavery, human rights issues? Whatever are those, identify them, prioritize them, and then manage them. Procurement professionals, we are hard-strapped for resource and time. You cannot be managing everything. So identify what are the risks based on what you're procuring, who are the suppliers on the tender list, and then set out how you're going to manage it. Due diligence, acknowledging by the process that we carry out, we're procuring goods, work, service packages. It's going to have some kind of adverse sustainability impacts, whether it's environmental, social, or economic. Acknowledge that, and that we are going to mitigate it. That's so that due diligence piece is carried out. Setting priorities, so you cannot focus on everything. Like I said, in managing the risks, you need to identify where you need to focus on. If the risk is major and if it's going to happen now and the effect is going to be catastrophic, it cannot be put on the back burner. That's an absolute red. It's a risk that needs to be dealt with now. Escalate it, take it to senior management. There needs to be a risk mitigation plan in place. If it's an opportunity, we see it as a blue. Can you encourage your suppliers to do some volunteering activities with you? If you undertake STEM activities, can your supply chain come along with you on that journey? Can you get some apprentices on board? These are opportunities versus risks. Identify your risks and opportunities, set the priorities so that you're not chasing everything and everyone all at the same time. Avoiding being complicit. So complicity, if you're aware that something unethical or unsustainable is happening in the tender process or within the supply chain, and you do one of two things or both, you keep quiet about it or you're hand in hand with it. When it comes to light, you will be equally to blame because you're aware of it or you took part in it. So avoid being part of those acts. Exercising influence. So by the nature of the job that we carry out, which is procurement, we are always in touch with our suppliers, whether it's early contractor involvement, pre-qualification or tender, awarding a contract. Exercise that time and the influence that you have with the suppliers to say, these are our sustainability goals as a project or at an organizational level. Where are you, Mr. or Mrs. Supplier, on your sustainability journey? What are you already doing in the space of social, economic, environmental opportunities? Maybe that can add to some of our project KPIs as well. So keep having those discussions and exercising the influence in the process. These are a few of the drivers for organizations for them to go on that sustainability journey. All of this will not apply to every sector, every organization. You do not need to take notes. You will get a copy of the slides. I will just take you through a couple of them. Responding to customer expectations. So if you're working on large infrastructure projects like Crossrail, Tideway, High Speed 2, you will know that the head contract works information asks for a lot of sustainability KPIs and targets. You probably flow that back to back into your subcontracts. You're responding to your ultimate client's expectations. Competitive advantage, you want to be, by offering sustainable products and services, you want to have that competitive advantage over your peers, your competitors in the same industry. Why not? You probably win more work there. You want to manage the risks of reputational damage, maybe financial loss, protect the brand value as well. Investor confidence, probably improved third-party ratings and confidence like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index in your organization. Improve supply relationships as well. So explore what's driving your organization from the top. Why are they going on this sustainability journey? The drivers for your organization will help you to then prioritize and set those goals for procurement and the supply chain. So all drivers will not apply to you. do a little bit of interrogation, find out what's driving your organization. Policy and strategy, like I said, it's very easy to write a policy to get the CEO and MD to sign off a corporate social responsibility policy, but it doesn't stop there. They need to walk the walk and talk the talk. Top management and heads of department, head of commercial, head of procurement, head of supply chain management will be accountable for driving sustainability, sustainable procurement. Staff on the ground, people in procurement and commercial will be the individuals responsible for embedding it into the process. However, having said that, if the message and the support is not coming from top management, people on the ground will not understand why am I doing this. It'll be seen as a waste of time. It's not part of my remit. It's just causing me more time and more paperwork. So this message needs to come from the top management so that staff on the ground understand the corporate vision and why it's being done. The video that I showed you just before talked about the golden thread. So if you've got a corporate policy and strategy, that needs to be reflected into procurement policy and strategy, whatever are your sustainability goals and ambitions, forming smart questions about it into your tenders, then put it into the contract, so you're making it contractually binding and out into the awarded contract to the supply chain. I'm going to take all questions at the end, so I'm just going to ignore the Q&A section for now. I've seen a lot of procurement policies and corporate policies. The corporate policy talks about this vision. We want to be sustainable, net zero by 2030, 2040, whatever is the target. And then procurement is so strapped for time on the ground. They want something quickly. Everyone needs something yesterday. They need it cheap and cheerful, and they don't care if they chop down the rainforest. I'm probably exaggerating here, but there's a disconnect then or misalignment between corporate policy and what's happening within procurement on the ground. So make sure the procurement policy aligns with the corporate vision and goals. Understanding your supply chain. Again, don't take notes. You will get these slide decks. If you do not know who sits in your supply chain, you're going to bring upon yourself a lot of risks, a lot of unknown risks, and that's a dangerous situation to be in. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you do not know your tier ones, tier twos, tier threes, you're not going to know the risks and even the opportunities there are for maybe some sustainability targets to add to your organizational targets. So through the PQQ process, ask some smart questions. Through your tender process, ask some smart questions, but do the due diligence piece beyond your tier ones as well. When we talk about managing implementation, this is literally just the policy. If you have a sustainable procurement policy, think about these things. Is my policy validating my corporate objectives, or is my procurement policy making me rush about and do things in an unsustainable manner? Have I established SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, or am I asking vague questions in my tenders? Yes, I have a sustainable procurement policy. Have I even bothered to communicate it? I deal with a lot of organizations in the consultancy space. They've got fantastic policies and strategies. They've just forgotten to communicate it to the supply chain or even their own staff internally. Ensure the policy is endorsed by management, but they also sponsor it in team days, team talks, and they're not just signed it off and it's a dusty document lying somewhere. Your policy, it needs to be assigned with clear responsibilities and accountabilities. Who does what, who measures and monitors, who's accountable for driving it, who does it day-to-day on the shop floor. Finally, assess and monitor your policy. You wrote a policy last year for sustainable procurement. Is it still relevant this year? Does it need to be tweaked? Is it 5 years old? Is it outdated? Has it gathered dust somewhere? Does it need to be up-revved? Please assess and monitor your policies. It could be out of date. The enablers are basically 6 helpers that will help you to embed sustainability in the procurement process. Governance. Don't reinvent the wheel. Incorporate sustainable procurement questions in your existing documents, your sourcing strategy, your pre-qualification questionnaire, and your tenders. I made the mistake of developing a separate PQQ for sustainability and a separate questionnaire to go into the tenders. What did that do? It only ate up a lot of my time. It created a lot of paperwork burden on myself and the supply chain. So if you've got an existing PQQ, whether you're using Achilles Building Confidence, they've got some CSR questions in there already, paper-based or PDF-based. If you've come up with some smart questions for your tenders, incorporate it into the same PQQ, incorporated the questions into the tender documents going out the door. Don't create more Word, Excel documents. It's gonna waste your time as well. Your own people, so take your people on the journey. Most of you are on the call today to learn a bit more. Put your people through training, either through the supply chain school. SIPS has also got the ethical sourcing, responsible sourcing models. Train your people before just writing a policy and saying, you shall do this. If they don't know how to embed sustainability into procurement, you're just going to stress them out and burden them. Two easy ways to do it is write it into people's job description so it becomes business as usual. The other way is to write some sustainability targets into PDRs, so your personal development review as well. If you've incorporated sustainability SLAs or KPIs into your tenders, make sure that data is fed back from the supply chain. You're managing and measuring and monitoring those sustainability KPIs. You will have done a brilliant piece of work of putting it into your PQQs, your tenders, and your contract. But if you don't measure and manage it, you've wasted your time and the supplier's time, and sustainability is just going to go out the door. They will perform excellently well in the technical scope, delivering the goods, work, services, but the sustainability angle is just going to go missing. Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. One size does not fit all. Every supplier will not bring the same amount of risk and opportunity to you. Every works package will not bring the same risk and opportunity to you. Who and what do you need to focus on? Which tenders need to have those robust sustainability questions in? The others, it's not that necessary. Do they need to have environmental questions in? Do they need to have social sustainability questions in? Look at the scope, the value, the contract duration. Is my supplier organization a large player in the market? Are they an SME? Where are they on that sustainability journey? Prioritize it that way. Engage your stakeholders. It's all not down to procurement professionals to think about sustainability in the process. The person who is asked you to procure something, the requisitioner, the end user, the budget holder, health and safety, quality, environmental, every team that feeds into the process needs to feed into the sustainability angle as well. It cannot all be down to us to write that scope and to write those questions. Finally, a grievance mechanism is also known as a whistleblowing policy. Most organizations have that for internal, for staff, but also through the tender process, flow down a whistleblowing policy or a grievance mechanism for suppliers. If they are aware that something unethical has happened in the process, they can reach out to you anonymously and you can address that concern. Governance, people, measurement, prioritize, stakeholder engagement, and finally, a grievance mechanism. These are your 6 helpers that you already probably have in-house. Some may or may not have a grievance mechanism, but you've at least got the first 5 to help you to embed sustainability into the procurement process. The process looks like plan, source, and manage. When you identify the need, challenge the need. Do you need this now? Do you need it in such less quantity? Can we bulk buy, economies of scale? Do you need a Rolls Royce? Can you do with a bicycle? Again, I'm probably exaggerating. Can you, Mr. Requisitioner, think of, Mr. or Mrs. Requisitioner, think of sustainability criteria to be included in the scope? Analyze the risks and impacts and the opportunities on whatever it is you've been asked to procure. Analyze the market. Don't always use the same tender list. Shake up your dormant, sleepy supply chain and see who else is out there, what else is out there in terms of a lean, mean, greener, innovative, more sustainable solution. That will help form your procurement strategy. At the sourcing stage, and I will take this in a little bit more detail on the further slides, you've got the PQQ and the tender. You're firming up the requirements before you go out the door with your tender. Supply selection both on the PQQ and the tender stage, and finally you award the contract. Between source and manage, there's a transition between procurement and the commercial team where the contract is executed and you hand over. When you hand over for the contract to be delivered in its scope and to be managed, ensure you hand over the balanced scorecard that includes for sustainability criteria so that the end user and the commercial team managing the contract and the scope does not forget about that sustainability angle that you have neatly embedded in the procurement process. Otherwise, like I said, the technical scope will get delivered, sustainability will go out the window. Couple of notes when planning your procurement. I'm not going to read off the screen. You're going to have all of these notes. Consider total cost of ownership, not just what you're buying, maintenance, spares, but also the impacts it's going to have on the environment. Probe the need. Do you need it? Do you need it right now in such less quantity? Do you actually need this at all? Consider the triple bottom line effects and impacts, social, economic, environmental. Understand how the supply chain perceives you. Don't just randomly dump 104 sustainability questions in the tenders. If it's a 5K order, if it's a £3 million spend, for example, then you can probably ask for every £1 million spend, give us 3 apprentices on board. But have those 360 open discussions. Is it feasible, possible? Don't just ask of the supply chain. When the specifications, again, are being developed, connect to the golden thread. What is my organization goal and vision? Ask appropriate questions. Think about the organization size in your supply chain. Can it be delivered by all the bidders in the tender list? There will be some SMEs as well. Tweak your questions according to the size of the organization. Is what I'm asking for appropriate to the risk, opportunity and scope, and even the value of the contract? If it's a 6-month contract for £3,000 or £5,000, and I'm going to ask you to do like 5 volunteering days or something with me, that's not realistic, that's not feasible. So keep it relevant, appropriate to even the value, the duration, and the scope of the contract. Again, I'm not going to read off the screen, but you've got the notes on there. Make sure it is smart so it can be measured and reported. If it's big, you won't know what to do with it later on. If there are any ultimate stakeholder client requirements, for example, high speed 2, for us as a main works contractor, SES JV, we had certain requirements. Over and above that, the client had certain higher level requirements. Make sure that's all flowing down into your subcontracts as appropriate where relevant. If you're buying materials and any eco labels or product labels apply to that product, make sure to use them. Fair trade, FSC for timber. If you're from the fashion industry, you've got BCI, Better Cotton Initiative, or organic cotton. Recyclability, you've got Red Tractor as well, and reducing with Carbon Trust. So you've got things like eco labels, but you've also got something like BES 6001, which promotes responsible sourcing of materials within the construction industry. In my career, I've used this both for rebar and aggregate. So eco labels, use of responsible sourcing standards within your spec, but make sure you understand them before putting them into your specification and tender documents. This is quite an important one. So in the sourcing process, you have the PQQ, which is an important stage, and the invitation to tender. Think about this as triple C: capacity, capability, and commitment. PQQ is capacity and capability. You're checking the capacity and capability of your subby, your supplier, to deliver on your sustainability criteria. At tender stage, you're checking the commitment. At PQQ stage, most organizations I find ask for a sustainability policy, an EDI policy, a modern slavery policy. Yes, most of the supply chain will have the policies. Along with that, ask them for 1 side or 2 sides, no more than 2 sides of an A4 sheet. Tell me, Mr. or Mrs. Supplier, how have you delivered this scope, this sustainability requirement on a previous project for a previous client? So what you're getting to see is not just your policy, but how have they met that requirement before? So capacity and capability in the PQQ stage. In the ITT, you're asking robust, hard-hitting questions. How will you deliver this for me now on this tender in terms of STEM activities, carbon reduction, adhering to the waste hierarchy? So you're asking for a commitment. If you're successful, this will be written into your contract. Please be aware of it, potential tenderer. So capacity, capability for PQQ, checking the commitment in the invitation to tender stage. Finally, when managing the contract, do not expect suppliers to automatically deliver on sustainability commitments unprompted. You have to manage the contract to hold them to all of the promises, commitments that they made when tendering, collect and analyze that data so that you can report upstream either to the project management if it's at project level or corporate management if it's within your organization to say, these were the ambitions, we flowed it into procurement, out in our tenders to the supply chain. These are the good news case studies, or it's not going so well here. And this is what we have achieved so far in reducing carbon, reducing waste, in the social cohesion or community engagement and investment. I'm not too fond of the word penalties, but try and incentivize your supply chain. You're taking them along on a journey. You're not beating them on the head with a stick, for example. Finally, when the contract is managed, think about what worked well, what didn't go so well, what can be done better next time in the next works package that I procure. Share those lessons learned internally. So what didn't go really well, share lessons learned with other procurement managers, buyers in your team. For things that the suppliers, subcontractors smashed out the park, probably do just a one-page good news case study to say, we procured this, this was the scope, this was a subcontractor, smashed the sustainability KPIs out the park. This is just a one-page write-up, good news case study. Share lessons learned and good news case studies internally within your organization so that everyone can see what was the outcome of what you've embedded in your process. That was sustainable procurement, but what's the output and the outcome of all of this? You've nicely embedded it into your process, in your tenders and out the door. So if you remember, I started the session with talking about the three spheres or the triple bottom line, environmental, social, and economic, neatly embedding it into your process. What happens as an outcome and an output of this? What is the outcome of that? And that is social value, but that is generated social value. And what do I mean by generated social value? You remember I said emphasis on the word positive. You're being proactive in embedding sustainability considerations into your process, which means you are now generating at the other end outputs and outcomes that is a generated social value. Rather than, I've seen some organizations that go backwards and say, oh, my supplier has reduced carbon, therefore I should now put a question in the PQQ about carbon, therefore that should shape my corporate policy. So they're going backwards in the process rather than starting from what is my goal that I want to then embed into the tender. So you're generating social value rather than realizing there's good stuff happening on the ground. Let me now put that as a question and now shape my policy. So don't go backwards. Start to generate it top to down and out to the supply chain. Very, very quick definition of social value. It's a way of describing the benefits to society from the delivery of goods, materials, works, plans, services. So again, it's talking about triple bottom line. People, planet, profit, environmental, economic, and social benefits to society, which people experience as, that created added value and is bringing a better quality of life to them. This is just one of the frameworks out there. So PPN06, this is PPN0620, which came out in 2020, a little bit of a framework to say these are some themes you can think about developing questions to go into your tenders, whether it's COVID-19 recovery, so it's helping local communities, economic inequality, creating new businesses, new jobs, new skills, increasing your capacity and resilience of the supply chain. Fighting climate change comes within the environmental sphere, equal opportunity or well-being. Using these models, you've also got the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Most organizations I've seen in the consultancy space use the UN Sustainable Development Goals to check which one of those goals fits with the values of my organization and the industry I'm in, and can I use that to develop questions for my tender. So PPN06, UN Sustainable Development Goals, whatever fits your organization, use that as a framework to start looking at what you need to consider. So PPN06 for buyers and suppliers, or even if you're using the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for the buying side, embed social value throughout the project. I just told you top to bottom throughout the process. Don't ask for everything. Everything will not be relevant to every single tender that you're procuring. Make people accountable. It's not sitting all on procurement's shoulder. Carefully consider what questions are asked at tender stage. You want a commitment type question at tender stage, capacity and capability at PQQ. So draft your questions accordingly, make it contractual. When the bids come back, don't forget to include those commitments in the contract, monitor it post-contract award. You're asking your supplier for data to back it up when it's managed and share positive outcomes. Suppliers, what do you need to do? Set out clear, measurable targets. Don't overcommit. Yes, sometimes it's very tempting because we want to win a piece of work on prestigious projects, but don't overcommit. Keep it smart, measurable, clear targets. Demonstrate added social value. Keep evidence of whatever it is, your added value that you're bringing to that works package for that client on that project. Focus on quality, not quantity, and be specific in whatever added value, social value it is that you are providing. So don't be in a rush to make promises you may not be able to deliver on. Oh, we're coming to the end almost. So quick summary. Today we talked about the triple bottom line, or the three spheres of sustainability: social, economic, and environmental. Connect to the golden thread. Your procurement department level sustainable procurement policy needs to be aligned with the corporate vision and goal. The two cannot be divorced or misaligned. Sustainable procurement has a positive environmental, social, economic impact that's proactively embedding your considerations all the way through. Make it business as usual. It's not difficult. It's basically sustainable procurement is smart procurement. And take that prioritized approach. You will not be able to manage all of your suppliers and your tenders. Prioritize which are the ones you need to focus your effort on. Couple of relevant resources. So we've got a website called ISO20400.org. You will have these links are all clickable. So when you get the slide deck, you can click and explore these resources. On this website, you've got some multiple choice questions and you can assess your organization where you are in the maturity of sustainability. We've got a couple of e-learning resources within the school as well. I've put the link at the bottom of the screen so you can explore that in your time. Over and above that, within the school, we've got some learning pathways, level 1 to level 5. I think level 5 is missing on my screen, but we've got 5 learning pathways in your sustainable procurement journey to train yourselves, to train your suppliers, to gain a bit more knowledge. And that is me for today. So I'm going to start addressing questions before I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. Okay, so is ISO 2400 a guidance standard, or does your organization have to demonstrate pass in order? No, so it is a guidance standard, so you don't get a pass or fail. The score when you get your organization assessed against it sits between 0 to 5. Typically, when I've assessed a lot of organizations, as a starting point, their score is somewhere between 2 to 3. And for an organization starting on that sustainability, that is quite a decent score. A couple of years after they implement the actions coming out of our recommendations report, I have seen organizations climbing up to a 3.5 to a 4 score in that space. Okay, if everyone can just leave the chat box alone and put all the questions in here, because I'm just going to concentrate in the Q&A box. Okay. How do you approach us having a desire to progress against some set targets? Working with clients who actively dissuade us from being... Okay, so your client is not really interested in you being sustainable as an organization. I would say carry on what you are doing, but maybe you do not have to report on your sustainability KPIs then to your clients, because for you as an organization, that is what's driving you. You're not going to suddenly start becoming unsustainable as an organization because your client or the client of the project you're working on actually doesn't really care about sustainability. So I would say go ahead with it. Guys and girls, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a feedback form link in the chat box. So for those of you who don't have questions, can go in and fill in the feedback form. I'm just conscious of time. Just a second. Okay, so to everyone, Those who don't have questions, I have put the link to the feedback form in the chat box. Please fill out the feedback form, okay? How do we avoid reactive procurement within the infrastructure industry, volatile market, shortage of core materials where prices of products are skyrocketing? So I come from the infrastructure industry as well. So I worked in Crossrail, tied with high speed too. Engage as much as possible with the supplier. I bought things like rebar and aggregates. Rebar, metal being such a volatile commodity, it was sometimes impossible, but then we had to ask for British steel. If it's not possible to get British steel, because at that time, and we still are in the middle of Brexit, we went back to the client and said, you know what, we need to purchase from Turkey and France, because with all three joint ventures on high speed 2 needing thousands of tons of rebar, it's not possible. Do as much as possible as you can in that space. If you've got a large requirement, a small part of it that is urgent, react to that. The rest of it, buy strategically and in a sustainable manner. Hopefully that answers your question. If early market engagement is key prior to tender stage and the design stage, how can this be influenced with our key material distributors? So normally, so early market engagement does not need to happen one-to-one. Now I've seen a lot of companies picking it up, but pre-COVID also we would do something like meet the buyer, meet the contractor events, wherein in these events, you look at your procurement schedule and you tell the market in the next 3, 6 months or 1 year, this is what's coming out to the market, this is what we're going to procure. These are my sustainability considerations. What are you already doing in this space? Rather than doing that early engagement for probably every works package, every works category. So either a large event where you're meeting 100 or 200 suppliers once a year or once every 18 months, but also for your key packages, maybe drop an email to everyone and say, these are the requirements, the tenders coming out in the next 6 months. These are our sustainability considerations, you know, and what are you doing in that space? Include the questions in the PQQ as well. Are there resources or guidance for very small organizations that want to implement sustainable procurement? Yes, there are guidance documents on the school as well. So a couple of the links that I've put in there, there are not webinars, there are e-learning modules on how to implement sustainable procurement, especially for SMEs. And I will also point you in the way of my colleague. Aya, if you can type out the email address for Vaishali in answer to the question from Jelly Mooring. Vaishali, my colleague, is the social value lead consultant, and she's putting together a model of how to embed social value and sustainability for SMEs. So Aya is going to give you the email address for Vaishali, who is my colleague. Question from Lauren, are there any tools you would recommend for managing performance and compliance for supply chain? Lauren, there are a couple of tools out there, but also we have a digital tool ourselves. Let me just find the link and put it in the chat box right now for you. 1 second. We've got a sustainability tool. So I'm just going to answer your question. How do I put this in the chat box? Oh, I can't put it in there. 1 second. Okay, so I'm just going to put it in there. Lauren, I'm just going to send you the link. So we've got a sustainability tool. It's a digital cloud-based tool to manage your suppliers' performance, but also to manage how you are doing against your policy, the internal sustainability KPIs you've set for yourself as an organization as well. Right. Are there any other questions from anyone? I would encourage all of you to go to the chat box. I have put the feedback form in there. It's just a couple of multiple choice questions. If you can give us your feedback. Are there any other questions? Hopefully I've answered all of your questions. Thank you. Some good feedback on there. Okay, one more. Okay, so, yep. Just going to give a sustainability link as well. Just a second. What I'm going to do is, for everyone, I'm going to put the link for our sustainability tool in the chat box itself. So you've also got the link to the sustainability tool. It's a performance management tool, basically, but for the sustainability aspects of the supply chain to measure and monitor. When you click on that link, it will say book a demo. The demo is absolutely free. Head of tool, Charles Snow, will be more than happy to book a demo in for you. So you can go ahead and do that. I've got one more open question. Laura just says, thank you. That's brilliant. I have another one of these sessions in March for any of your colleagues who want to come onto it. Next month, I'm running a session on supply chain capacity and resilience. This is on the back of everything that's happened, so COVID and Brexit, but more from a supply chain organization point of view, what they should think about going from reacting to rebounding and adjusting to the new normal. So it's all been a bit crazy for all of us, but yeah, what does that new normal look like now that we're going back into the office? So yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay. Right. Hopefully you have all clicked on the link. So I've given you the link to the sustainability tool. Hopefully you have also filled in the feedback form. We really, really appreciate your feedback. And the feedback from previous webinars were about Mel. Can we have a little bit more interaction? Can we have a little bit more in-depth and a detailed session with you? So listening to your feedback from the new financial year, our directors have decided that, yes, I will be able to run 3-hour workshops going in-depth into sustainable procurement via the schools. So keep your eye out. That will be post-April. So I think I might run one every other month or something like that. That was based on previous webinar feedback. People wanted to interact with me a little bit more, but also do some practical exercises to embed sustainability. All in the new financial year, definitely not this side from the 1st of April. Yeah, so I'm going to give you 7 minutes of your life back on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to say thank you for being a brilliant audience. Hopefully this has been an amazing session, and yeah, take care and have a very good afternoon, everyone. Cheers. Bye.